Hi, so I'm Mr. Crocker, and today we're going to be talking about the next step in geometry. So last time we went over the sort of basic building blocks, points, segments, rays, and lines. And today we're going to talk about angles. Okay, and angles are on the board here. Angles are what happens when you start to put together segments, or usually they're going to be drawn as rays with an arrow coming off of each. But an angle is created anytime two segments come together, or it can be two lines crossing, or it can be two rays. Okay, anytime that those structures meet each other, an angle is created. There are angles and shapes. Okay, there are angles all over the place. So we take these angles and we put them into three groups. Okay, the first group we call acute, and acute angles are angles that are measured at less than 90 degrees. Okay, so there's this thing called a protractor, and it basically just measures how wide open an angle is. Like if you think about a mouth, okay, so when a mouth, like an alligator mouth maybe, is just open, okay, this is 0 degrees, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, and then at 90 degrees, I skipped some numbers there, but at 90 degrees, which is like a perfect L, that becomes right, a right angle. That's the second group. But everything below that, from 89 degrees to 0 degrees, we call acute. Okay, so acute angles are really 1 to 89 degrees. Because if you had 0 degrees, it wouldn't be an angle, it would just be a segment, right? There has to be some separation, two pieces, right? 1 degree, then it's an angle, okay? And it doesn't matter which way it's facing or turned. If this is an acute angle, then this is also acute, and this is acute, and this is acute. We're not talking about which way it's facing. We're talking about how wide open it is. So the angles that are almost closed, that are not open very wide, those are acute. Now, the next category, the next group, are right angles. And right angles, they're not a range like acute angles are from here to here. Right angles are only exactly 90 degrees, exactly, okay? And 90 degrees looks like a square. It looks like the corner of a square. A square, in fact, has, or a rectangle, square, I can't really do it, has 4 right angles, okay? When you get that perfect L shape, and it doesn't matter again if it's turned this way or that way, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how wide open it is. And when it is that perfect L, 90 degrees, we call that a right angle. Now, obtuse angles are what happens, or what we call angles, when we get past 90. So if this is exactly 90 is a right angle, one little tick past that becomes obtuse. And obtuse goes all the way from 91 degrees to 179 degrees. Okay. So acute, right angle, 90 degrees, right? And then obtuse, all the way until you get to that flat line, which we actually call a straight angle. It's not an angle. It's a straight angle, but it's just a flat line, right? 180 degrees. There's no, that's not important. What's important is that you understand obtuse. These are the big ones, the ones that are wide, wide open. Okay, so they can look like this or this or this, or they can be just a smidge too wide to be right angles. That's obtuse. Okay. Now, one more thing while we're talking about angles, you're going to see these angles be named, described. Okay, and they are named by their points. And this point here that is the corner, every angle has a corner like that. Okay, it's called a vertex. And they'll always put the letter of the vertex in the middle of the name. So like this would be angle ABC. B is the vertex. Okay, this would be angle CDE. Okay, angle FGH. So they name them for the points that you find on them. Okay, let's look at some examples here. So acute, right, and obtuse angles. Okay, so we have some shapes here, and shapes are made of angles. Okay, a triangle has 3 angles. Okay, angle, angle, angle. Corners, really. Okay, so if you look at the angles that are in this shape, how would we classify them? Are they acute? Are they right? Or are they obtuse? Well, so in my head, I'm kind of blocking out the rest of this shape, right? So if I'm looking at this little angle right here, I'm going to just not even pay attention to the rest of this shape. And this shape, or this angle, I should say, this angle is closer to being shut than it is to being flat, right? It's on, here's 90, it's over here somewhere. So this is an acute angle, okay? And if I kind of turn my head, you know, and imagine, I can see that all of these are acute angles, okay? Another way I do this sometimes when I'm not sure is I will draw where I think a right angle is, and I'll use that. So like, for instance, here's the bottom line, bottom axis, okay? This would be a right angle, as best I can draw it. This is inside of that. It's less, so it's acute. Okay, same thing with this guy. Here's one. That's, I think that's about right, about square. It's less than that. It's inside of a right angle, so it's also acute. Okay, now if we look at this triangle, it's a little bit different, right? This angle here, okay, if you just zoom in on that, just pay attention to that. Don't, you know, just look at those 2 segments and what shape is made where they meet. This is a right angle, okay? So this is what we call a right triangle. Okay, and then this one, like if this were a right angle, be way up there, it's less than that, so that's an acute angle. Okay, this angle down here is also acute. Okay, it is possible to have a triangle. That's an obtuse angle. So that could be obtuse, and then you have 2 angles that are very acute. So it's possible to have a triangle with an obtuse angle. Okay. Okay, look at this shape. It's a square, right? To be a square, you have to have a certain kind of angles, right? Squares cannot have acute angles. Squares cannot have obtuse angles. They can only have right angles. Okay. All all four angles in a square are right angles, or it's not a square. Same thing with a rectangle. Okay, that's the wrong letter. All four angles are right angles. Okay, squares and rectangles both have four right angles. And then we can get into some different shapes. So this is a pentagon. It's a pentagon because it has 5 sides. Okay. It also has 5 angles. 5 sides, 5 angles. 3 sides, 3 angles. 4 sides, 4 angles. Okay. This angle, here's what a right angle would be. If it's outside of that, it's past it. So this is an obtuse angle. In fact, both of these are obtuse. Okay, now I've got to kind of turn my head a little bit, but I think this angle here is also obtuse. Okay, this angle is very wide. It's also obtuse. That one, sometimes it's kind of tough to judge a drawing, but that angle looks like a right angle to me. Okay, so I'm gonna make that one a right angle. Even though it's turned on its side, I'm just saying that when I look at it, it looks like it is that perfect L shape. It's kind of like this, but the opening is the same size. Okay. This shape, it has 4 sides. It has 4 angles. It's not a square. It's not a rectangle because it doesn't have right angles. What it is a trapezoid. Okay. It's kind of looks like half of a hexagon, right? It's a trapezoid. So a trapezoid, this kind of trapezoid at least, will have, that's an obtuse angle, and that's also an obtuse angle because it's open past 90 degrees, right? Like if it were 90, that perfect L shape, well, it's past that. It's bigger than that, so that's obtuse. This angle is also obtuse, okay? It's past 90. These angles, though, if I take this and I try to draw my perfect square off of it, it's inside of it, so it is acute. Same deal, or here, acute. Okay, so classifying angles. Acute, 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 all the way from 1 degree to 89. The little ones are acute. It's a cute little angle, okay? At a perfect L, that's a right angle. 90 degrees exactly. At 89, it's acute. At 91, it's obtuse. And then it's obtuse, 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 all the way to 179 degrees, obtuse angle. And then at 180, when it's just flat, okay? So it's literally just a line. Okay. That's what they would call a straight angle. Say it's not an angle. I'm not the person who gets to decide though. Okay, so acute, right, and obtuse angles.